Welcome to MyLife, Chassidus Applied, episode 171. I'd like to dedicate this episode in honor of my new grandson, Menachem Mendel, Marcus, the son of Benzi and Rashi, and may our teachings here be a merit to him as he grows into being a Chassid Yerushalayim and a Lamdan. We're in the week of Parshas Matos-Maasei, and we are in the end of the first week of the 3 weeks. So I'd like to talk about those timely matters, and always in the context of Chassidus Applied, applying it to our lives. Because sadly, Torah, you can learn Torah and be a master of Torah. You can be a master of all the sections of Torah and still suffer from dissonance, which is, as the Talmud says in Brachos, according to the Girsa of Ein Yankiv and cited in Chassidus, Gam va'pu machtarte rachmone karya, which means a thief, before he goes to steal, he calls to God, he prays to Hashem, to Rahmanit, that he should help him succeed, which seems like complete insanity. It's one thing, you ignore the boss, you ignore the watch guards, the watchman and the guard and the gatekeeper, but to say to Hashem, you told me not to steal, and I'm praying to you to help me succeed in what you told me not to do, sounds insane. And yet, if you think about it, it reflects a tremendous concept, what is called today dissonance, cognitive dissonance, emotional dissonance, where you could really be committed and have faith, and not fake, not hypocrisy, and not false, and not any type of superficial faith. It could be a real faith, but faith is what Chassidus calls as makiv. It can be makiv, meaning it surrounds you, but it doesn't permeate you. It's not integrated. Now, frankly, if you think about it, all our values and all our standards and all our ideals are always greater than our actions. So there's always an element of us believing in something and yet not fully acting on it, or sometimes even acting in direct contradiction. So when you talk about what the point of Torah is always Meloshen Heirah, the single most popular, most repeated statement from the Rebbe, Torah Meloshen Heirah, Torah is from the word directive. And Chassidus particularly, it's all about applying it to our personal, emotional, psychological lives, that we take an idea and it doesn't remain an abstract concept. It doesn't remain just haskalah, but it's something that comes into Aveda. Aveda means, in the broadest sense of the word, that you're working on yourself with it. You're trying to work on your personality. You work on controlling, refraining, repressing, and obviously harnessing and transforming your being into something of a higher and greater nature. So that is really what the whole Chassidus is. There's a sikha in the, I believe, Tafshin Vav or Tafshin Zayin from the Friedrich Rebbe, where it says that Amash asked the Friedrich Rebbe a question: why is it that when it comes to Nigla the Torah, you have the concept of Yagdal Torah v'Yadir? What is Yagdal Torah v'Yadir? There's an Indian of learning Torah just the shame because you're learning Hashem's wisdom. Then there's Asukah Shmaitis Ali B'Dilchasa, which is another part of learning Torah, that you're learning in order to derive a halacha, a psak, a conclusion, and some type of ruling regarding a particular matter. But there's the concept of learning just for learning purposes. And when it comes to Chassidus, we hear from the Rabbeim again and again that Haskalah is not enough. Every Haskalah has to come into an Aveda, and they're actually very, very negative and very dismissive of people who just conceive of ideas and study the Haskalah, the brilliance of and abstract ideas of Chassidus without bringing it into Aveda. So why is there not in Chassidus, he has the Friedrich Rebbe, the concept of also Yagdal Torah v'Yadir, that you learn, just to learn. The ideas are also, and as he says in the Sikun Sachen, that it's Rom v'Nisav, it's a mitzvah daily. It's even to learn about the Eibishter Dasa Lekei Avicha, to know God and to know Seder Shtalshus, is from the greatest mitzvahs for Yedaita, to know. The Friedrich Rebbe's response was that Tzid verstehst yet, Tzid verstehst nicht, Azeh is der Inyan. There's the expression from Chassidim, the Rebbe brings it also in some sikhs, that whether you understand or you don't understand, Azeh, that's how the Inyan is. Now, is this an answer, or is it meant to be that some things don't have to necessarily have an answer, or is this gufa an answer? That I could leave for all of us to clear and to discuss and to analyze. But that's how we responded. That means there is something about integration. I would speculate and say that in Nigla the Torah, like he says in the Geras HaKedesh Simcha Chavav, because it's Ilona the Tevara, as he discusses at length, how could you call it a tree of good and evil? Torah Chaz v'Shalom doesn't have one shemetz of anything negative, but because it discusses good and evil. It discusses matters of right and wrong. It discusses matters of permission, permitted and prohibited. It discusses about arguments of false arguments, where people come and say false witness, or there are two people arguing about something, and one can't be saying the truth. In other words, the nigla of the Torah involves itself and engages with the human condition as it is even in a corrupt state, in a state as it is in this material world. Chassidus is called Ilona Dechaya, which means Eitz HaChayim, and that does not have Tevarah. Because its whole asik of Chassidus is all about less Tomen v'less Machlekes v'lei, like he says there, that it doesn't have questions and it doesn't have arguments and it doesn't have... So Alter Rebbe explains already the questions. The Chassidus are questions, but they're all within the... It's not a question because you're in a dark state, like Machshaka Meshivani and Talmud Bavli, and you're trying to figure out how to understand something. It's questions more in the process. Chassidus is a process of understanding Elokus. Chassidus is l'chatchila, something that's Eitz HaChayim, and does not have, it's all about Elokus, it's all about the divine elements of existence and divine elements within existence and what the divine wants of us, etc., etc. So perhaps you can explain by that in Nigla there's a possibility of more dissonance and more lack of integration simply because the Nigla involves itself in a world that is fragmented and not integrated. With the intention, obviously, of integrating it and aligning the world to God's will and Devar Hashem Zu Halacha, how Hashem wants us to live our lives. But in Chassidus, the Chatchila, it's all about integration and fusion and seamlessness. So perhaps there is that's altogether not there the concept of learning and not bringing and applying, which is somewhat of another explanation. This applies Chassidus that we are focusing on, the importance of it not being in any form disconnected. But this brings me back, of course, to the topic that when we discuss any topic, this was somewhat of an introduction, including Pasha Matos-Maasei, 3 weeks, that we don't just talk about what are the 3 weeks. Halacha Shulchan Aruch tells you what the 3 weeks are, why we honor it, why we don't do weddings, why it's a time of grieving and mourning due to the different events, sad events that happen. What Chassidus comes and explains is why the 3 weeks is a form of dissonance and disconnect. Remember, the destruction of the Second Temple especially was due to sinas chinam, a disconnection, and not just disconnection, but a divisiveness, a baseless divisiveness between people. What connection does that have to the destruction of the temple? Because how could Hashem Echad, one divine God, rest among us when His children are divided? There's basically no keli for it. So it's a sibah mesubah, cause and effect. When the family, God forbid, is torn apart, is it possible to really have the presence of the parents there in a peaceful way, to make believe like nothing is happening? And we know the greatest pain for parents is to see when their children are not in agreement with each other. So essentially, divisiveness, which is a form of dissonance and separation, was brought down. It also created a dissonance between the divine and earth. So V'shachanti b'seichem is a place where the Elokus, divine, meets heaven, meets earth, and when the earth, the beings on earth, behave in ways that don't allow the divine to rest there, how could the Shekhinah rest in a place where there's a broken, a fractured home, a divided house? Do not contain the divine presence. And that's the period which we are in. But, as Chassidus emphasizes, this is only a stage in order to lead us to a far greater place where we find even a deeper unity with the building of the third temple. So the 3 weeks is not just a time of grieving and sadness over the events that happened, but it's above all, it's about us using this as a catalyst to dig deeper and build something much greater. And that's why the Rebbe's emphasis on the 3 weeks, more than all the Rabbeim before him. We have the Tzemach Tzedek, yes, he wrote an Eicha, as the Rebbe cites, how you teach Eicha, the book of Lamentations that we say Tisha B'Av, how we interpret it in a positive way, based on the principles in Likutei Torah and the Alter Rebbe's principle that every curse in Torah really has a deeper chsadim nestorim, a deeper love, a deeper kindness, however it's concealed. We do have that, but the Rebbe made it into a full movement, so to speak, that the 3 weeks, a period of time where we should add an increase in Torah and Tzedakah, add an increase in every possible way, Pekudei Hashem Yesharim B'Samchei Lev, things that bring joy, according to Allah. Obviously, things that are not permitted, but to learn Hilchos Beis HaBchira, to add in Tzedakah, to learn Torah in general, to add in Avos Yisrael, and the different directives that this period in time is critical, because it's there to be magdim refuah l'maka, to bring the refuah that is the healing for this for the illness of divisiveness. So here again you see Chassidus applying Chassidus to our lives, that besides the fact that it reflects our psychological dissonance, the gamva pumachtarta, that each of us has our so-called inconsistencies, on a personal level, it's also on a collective level, a time that we reflect on the separation in order to remind us of how much we have to dig deeper to create a deeper unity. And that's why Yehovchi Yom HaMelu, when Mashiach comes, there will be that reconnection, but the reconnection in a much deeper way than it was before, because we always know, like about Shuvah, higher than a tzaddik, once you've broken something and you repair it, it has a deeper connection than it had initially. You could also add, being that we're the dirah shvi and we're closer to the Gula than ever, that the last steps is to be mevared and refine the 3 weeks. You could say in earlier generations the focus may have been a little more on the sadness, even though then there's no such thing in Judaism as just focusing on negative. It's always toward the positive. But as we get closer to the Gula, it even becomes more compelling and more sense of urgency to look at these days as opportunities to take the negative in our lives and find the positive within them. Which in personal terms means each of us have our challenges, our 3-week challenges, and we each have to look inside ourselves, and we could say, you know what, I'm resigned, I've given up, it's hopeless, I'll just focus on other things. And the answer is no. Part of redemption, part of salvation, part of healing is to heal those components that are seemingly broke off, the fragments, the broken promises, the dashed hopes, the different disappointments and the different challenges and betrayals we may have experienced in our lives, to realize that everything is a catalyst and a stepping stone that can catapult us to a completely different dimension. And we do never think in terms that we should write off a part of our lives. It's true, we can't change the clock, we can't turn the clock back, but you can take those experiences and extract the positive and discard the negative, which is the focus of the 3 weeks in simple English terms of using the Chassidus of this period in time to explain this. In Matos-Maasei, the Tzemach Tzedek and the Rebbe cites it as well, and Sichos talks about this a bit. But as I said, the Rebbe turned it into a whole movement in actions and a whole campaign actually about the 3 weeks as we go toward the 9 days and toward Tisha B'Av, to transform it into positive days by doing it the way we have to do it through this period of time, which is not obviously in a direct way of celebration, but it's taking the negative and looking for the deeper meaning in it, and of course adding in, as I said, learning Hilchos Beis HaBchira, the laws of the Beis HaMikdash, whether it's in the Rambam or in the Mishnah and Midas or in the book of Yecheskel, the Sefer Yecheskel and Tanakh, and learning ideas that are connected to Churban and to Golus and Geula, and above all Geula, to be zeicher to the Yehovchi Yom HaMelu. With that, each of the 3 weeks usually the 3 weeks begin either Pinchas, and the Pinchas, Matos-Maasei, and Dvarim, Shabbos Chazain is always the Shabbos before Tisha B'Av. Sometimes it's a little different depending on whether it's a leap year. But the second parsha that we're reading now is Matos-Maasei, which is always in the 3 weeks, and this is where the Shalach HaKadosh actually says that even though the parshas the events occurred before the events of the 3 weeks, yet there's always a connection, because the parsha is Nitzchis and the Torah was written before creation, Alpayim Shana Kodem Torah Le'elam, so it has hidden in it the events that would happen throughout history. There's one lesson from Matos-Maasei I'd like to share that is relevant to this period in time. Matos-Maasei are 2 chapters, and if you think about it, the word Matos and the word Maasei seem to be and suggest opposite features. Matos literally means either Matos refers to the tribes, there's Matos and Shvatim, or Mata and Shevet also refers to, which is where the tribe, the name comes from. Mata is a stick, and Shevet is a stick. Just like Mata is a tribe and Shevet. What's the difference between the 2 words? Shevet is a soft twig, something that's pliable and bendable. Matis is a dried out rod, like a cane, that is dried and very inflexible and very sturdy, so it could support something. Each has a mile, like we say sometimes. A person should always be flexible like a reed, and not strong like a cedar. On the other hand, the mile of Matis is that type of sturdiness and steadfastness that you can rely on. Maasei, on the other hand, what does the word Maasei mean? Movement. These are the journeys. These are the journeys that the Jewish people took. This is the end of Parsha Bamidbar, the 4th book, concluding the 42 journeys that they took throughout the wilderness. Journey by definition is movement, is mobility. Mata by definition is sturdiness. So it seems to be 2 separate items, not just separate, antithetical ones. So the Rebbe explains in his inimitable way in the names of the Pashas that everything's Ashgacha Pras and a name contains the theme, that the truth is success in life, and especially during these 3 weeks, requires two elements. On one hand, we need to have sturdy foundations. Look at a tree. What would a tree be like if it was just growing in all directions, didn't have solid roots? The solid roots, without the roots, it would not be able to expand. So we all need foundations. Every building needs a foundation. On the other hand, you don't live in a foundation. Foundation is there, invisible under the ground. And upon the foundation, you build floors, or in the case of a tree grows, and it's constantly moving. It's Maasei. It's in a state of constant mobility. Life that doesn't move, God forbid, is death. So life, by definition, is kol chai misnaneya. Everything that's alive is moving. And movement, Maasei, is the exact opposite of Matis. But you see, in life, both are necessary. We need to have the solid foundation upon which we build and we grow infinitely and never stop. Mailam b'kedesh. Every day, every moment, yalchu machayil l'choy, we go from strength to strength. When you think about it from a psychological personality perspective, you'll find people that are very good. They're very mates type of people. What does that mean? You can rely on them like a clock. They're always on time. They're reliable. They're consistent. Literally. You know, a word's a word. Then there are people with the opposite. They're always moving. They're always late. They're always on the move. You can never sit them down for too long. And you start saying to yourself, which is better? Let's take in marriage. On one hand, the sturdy, the solid person you can rely on, but on the other hand, it may lack of adventure. It lacks the spontaneity. It may lack improvisation, a flexibility that's necessary. Because just as there's positives in steadfastness, just as positives in consistency, there's also downside. Because it could be very boring, monotony. On the other hand, a person who's always moving can be very exciting and very adventurous, but they're not reliable. So, of course, everybody wants the best of both worlds. Comes Yiddishkeit and says exactly right. You could have the best of both worlds. You have to know where what. There are things that need to be solid and never changing principles, certain foundational elements, morality, that our faith, our commitment to each other, that is not open for flexibility. Like one day you're committed, one day you're not. On the other hand, anything really alive, anything dynamic is growing, has vitality. It's always growing. So you see a plant, it has its root, then it grows. How do you maintain both, even if your personality is more leaning to one Mates, personality of Mates, or Maasei? That's why we have what's called in Chassidus bittul. It's not just about who you are. It's about dealing with situations beyond yourself. And not always doing what's comfortable for you. For a person who's more of a steady, consistent, they have to work on themselves, and their avodah is to go a little out of their comfort zone and reach a place where they're a little more flexible when necessary. And they don't go crazy when something's not exactly the way they organized it. On the other hand, the person who's the adventurous type and the person who's is the mobile, Maasei, traveler, the journeyer, the free spirit, that's the bohemian has to be a person who the tzad bittul knows there are things you need to commit to, and you need to work on yourself in this situation. You have to do what is good for the other, and not just good for yourself. The truth is it's also good for you. And having bittul is what takes us away from being completely locked in our style and our personality. And the 3 weeks is exactly the same thing. On one hand, the 3 weeks is true, it's a sad time. But in a way, it wakes you up from complacency. Had the Beis HaMikdash continued standing, despite the divisiveness and the disagreements and the sinas chim, the baseless hatred, that would not have been healthy. Say, you know what, my commitment is so strong, the Beis HaMikdash continues standing. No. When something is wrong, there has to be some type of uproar. There has to be some type of reality check, some type of market correction. Shviras hakelim. Things are not good. But it's meant to be, Seisar Almanas Livnes, is meant to be a break in order to bring a greater repair. So when you see something's not working and everybody's happy, there's something wrong with that. You want someone to say, hey, something's wrong, we got to do something about this. So movement can also be a force of healing, and steadfastness can be a source of infection. Someone says, I'm not going to deal with it. I stand in one place, I'm not moving. Movement is necessary for healing. You need fresh air, you need some change, you need some Maasei, some journey. Mishana mokem, mishana mazel. You change your location, you change your mazel. On the other hand, we also need the solid basis, the solid foundations of things that are very important in our lives. To make a decision, in each case we have to decide, we have to determine, and sometimes you need a mashpia, a mentor, to help you determine which area needs movement and which area needs sturdiness. And that's the Matos-Maasei connection that concludes the Sefer Bamidbar, which is, of course, the entire 42 journeys. If you're interested, this is just as an aside. A number of years ago, I wrote up a whole, based on the Baal Shem Tov's Torah, that every one of us goes through the 42 journeys in our lifetime. In some places it says, the Baal Shem Tov says that every day we go through 42 journeys. So I did research a few years ago, what are the 42 journeys in our lives? And I wrote it up online, meaningfullife.com. You can find each of the 42 journeys in our personal lives based on the Baal Shem Tov's Torah. So that deals with the opening part of that we always begin with, the timely thing. But let's now go to some topics, specific topics, questions. Some of them have been asked before, some are new questions, and this is an opportunity to invite you to present your question or comment or anything you'd like to share that you feel is important at meaningfullife.com/MyLife. There's a forum there, completely anonymous, where you can write anything you'd like to write, and we try to cover everything that people address, even things that may be somewhat controversial or taboo or unspoken, because we have a firm belief that the best way to heal, the best way to grow, is to be open and direct, obviously in the proper, modest, and subtle and dignified fashion. So we go now to the question of Tznius. Now Tznius I've discussed, and I run a cross-reference on the same place, meaningfullife.com/MyLife. You can also find the archives of all the previous 170 episodes. Yes, it's 170 episodes, and they are all archived. You can look it up, and it's all online. There are also timestamps, so you can find the topics as you see them fit. You can look for topics by searching on our site. So the Tznius topic was covered in episode 4, 97, 98, and 110. And I'm sure some others as well, at least tangentially. But because it's a prevalent topic, here's when I'm reading exactly uncensored version of a question. Rabbi Jacobson, there are many issues challenging our communities. We have young couples having to pay rent above their means. They are hurting. We have couples with children struggling to pay an enormous amount of tuition for schools and camps. They are hurting. And it doesn't get easier as the children grow older. Lately, it has become almost mandatory for a girl to spend a year in seminary in Eretz Yisrael. That is a $20,000 bill without a question. The parents of these girls are hurting. The Rabbanim put out a magazine this past week. The first article is about Tznius. With all the hurting going on in our community, is Tznius our only issue? Is it the number one issue? Complaining about Tznius at a time like this seems to be insensitive and the wrong battle to choose. Another question in the same family of Tznius. Number 2, it seems to me that in our society, all it takes to be considered a frum woman is Tznius. As long as you're Tzniuslik, you're good to go. You're frum. On the other hand, if a woman has a weakness with Tznius, her Shmir Shabbos is worth nothing. Her Kashrus is worth nothing, etc., etc., etc. My question is as follows. Is this really the dirah of Torah? Is this really the dirah of Chabad? Is this what the Rebbe taught us? Okay, Tznius, of course, is a topic that is always gets people riled up on both sides of the aisle, if I could put it that way. And it's, you almost can never win when you talk about it, because if you talk about it too leniently, people say Tznius is the most important thing. You talk about it too aggressively, they say it's a turnoff. So let me try to put it in a balanced way, which I always attempt to do, without any hysterias, histrionics, I think is the word, histrionics or hysteria, or any extremes or any emotional reaction, but simply from a Torah point of view. Is Tznius an important thing? I don't think anyone that's a Torah or Chassidus person can deny that. What is the meaning of Tznius? That's already another story. Is it the number one most important thing? Well, there are Sfarim that talk about how Tznius is the skula, and the Rebbe cites it as an important element in the success of a community, in the success of families, in the success of Shalom Bayis, harmony, domestic harmony, and so on. So there's no question there are sources. And I'm talking strictly what the Torah says, not what any individual says. Everything needs to have sources. But as anything in Torah, you can bring sources and explain the importance of Tznius and how it holds the secret of so much success in life, and so many problems can be prevented and preempted through Tznius. However, besides the fact is how you present it. Everything in Torah also talks about not just what you say, but how you say it. And there's no question in the how you say it, there's a lot of problems. And the bare fact is, because you find normal and healthy people, I'm not talking about people who are just hefker people who want to do whatever they want. People who are Yirei Shamayim, and they're very disturbed of how Tznius is presented. It's a turnoff at how it's presented. And maybe the best proof in the pudding is it doesn't work. If it doesn't work, the method you're approaching, it could be you're saying everything 100% right. You have to look at yourself, as the Rebbe says, when something doesn't reach the other person, even if you're saying what's right, the Rebbe always looks at the person who's speaking. Are there words from the heart? Is it coming from a caring place? Is it someone that only talks about Tznius, or they'll also talk to you about other things in your life? A lot of factors that go into communication and trust, not just stating facts of what's important. So the fact that, and I'm not here to criticize or not criticize Rabbanim, it's not my role. They have their role to play. Rabbanim have to be respected. A community needs a Rav, needs Rabbanim for authority and for direction and guidance. So I'm speaking now on the inyan of it. I'm not going to go into any specific magazines or letters or writings. It's not my job to comment on that. But I talk to myself as I talk to anyone. If it's coming across that the Tznius topic is, oh no, who wants to hear this again? Or the reaction is there's a bunch of people that focused on their certain narrow way of looking at things, and they don't even know how to understand the real challenges a community is facing. All they talk to me is about the same mantra with Tznius or whatever it is they pick on. Then you know you're not successful, simply not because you're saying the wrong thing, and it's not even bad intentions. You're just not communicating. You're not in touch. You're not with it, and that's a critical component. A critical component. Who wants to hear someone preaching to them, even if it's all true? If you don't sense a care, you don't sense a sensitivity, a compassion. So absolutely, when people are writing such a letter, that they're hurting intuition, and they're hurting in all other matters, the only thing they hear about is Tznius, you can rest assured, you don't need to be a prophet or a son of a prophet, that you're not really going to get through. Now, does this mean that the Tznius shouldn't be spoken about? No, absolutely not. I'm making it very clear. It's how you say it, and in the context that you say it. There are many things that I've seen being condemned in different communities, and that's all people hear about, the condemnation. Give us an alternative. Suggest something. That's one key point. Suggest something that's productive, instead of just saying, that's no good. Now, going to Tznius, another point I'd like to make is, Tznius a symptom or a cause? Is it the cause? In other words, if everybody was Tznius, all other problems would not go away, but at least would be somewhat mitigated, weakened. Or is it a symptom? Maybe it's because a state of mind or a state of relationships that we're having with each other, with rabbis, with the lack of trust, in general, a breakdown of a lot of fundamental principles. Tznius is one of the places one of the symptoms and one of the places that's where it expresses itself. I'm of the school of thought that it's a symptom and not a cause. Obviously, every symptom can become a cause, because once you have a problem, that problem becomes a source of other problems. But when talking to an individual one-on-one, and let's say they're not dealing, that Tznius is lax by them, is that the first topic you speak to them about? Why is it lax by them? If Tznius is defined, and we've talked about this in those previous episodes, if Tznius is defined as Hatzna lechasim Hashem Elokecha, you shall walk with dignity before your God. And it's a statement made to the Kohanim, the priests, as they went into the temple, the male priests. And with the awareness that Tznius is not just for women, and it's not just about covering body parts, but it's for men equally, and it's even when you're in private, it's even how you take a shower. Because it's about dignity. It's not about not something, it's about yes something. Standing dignified. A dignified human being created in the divine image, there's expectations. Beautiful expectations. So if a person feels themselves as a beautiful person, and feels their dignity and their majesty, and they feel people validating that and affirming that, that is the best way for that person to behave in a dignified way. If a person is not dressing the way the standards that Torah, Halacha, Rabbanim, or whatever the standards are, you have to wonder why. Is it just the person came up to hefke young? I mean, someone just God forbid, as some people say, like a slut in the street? Not necessarily. You meet people, some very refined people, and they're not they're lax in this area. You find the opposite too. You can find someone dressed perfectly according to every law of Tznius, covered from head to toe, and they're very not Tznius in their language, in their body language, in their behavior, in their attitudes, and so on. Again, there are rules, and we talked about this at length, that in Judaism the outer and the inner are equally important. The inner probably more important, but the outer is also an expression of the inner. That's why Kohanim and all of us, all men and women, have a way to stand before God and stand with each other, and there's a certain etiquette. That's a normal thing. But when you're having such a crisis, as some are calling it in Tznius, you have to look a little deeper, which of course is always more uncomfortable. Unfortunately, I'm not going to repeat horror stories, but I've heard of situations where Tznius was very much a focus in a home where there was literally molestation going on in that same home. Now, I'm not suggesting everyone talks about Tznius is in that category, but what is that? What message do you think that left to children? Do you think those children are dressing Tznius today? I mean, I'm giving you a sad part of it. And there's also the opposite. There are families that are extremely dignified for whatever reason. Maybe they're not aware, maybe they're not knowledgeable, maybe they don't put enough focus on it. That the edelkeit is there, but the clothing is perhaps not always up to par exactly the way it's supposed to be. The best way is through love and through care and concern. And tznius by definition means discretion. So this mere thing of making these placards and announcements, I personally think that alone could be not tzniusdik. There was a guy who told me, a cynical guy, but this is what he told me. He said, I went to Jerusalem. I never had so many machshavas zaras. He's not an observant Jew. But he knew the word because he came from the yeshiva world. I never had so many negative thoughts. Then when I went to Mea Shearim and I saw the sign that describes every part of the human body, of a female body that needs to be covered now, I never thought of it. I didn't even know there were those parts. So sometimes you can talk about tznius in a non-tzniusdik way. One of the key things with tznius is to also convey it in a tzniusdik way, which doesn't just mean in whispers, but it means in a discreet way, in a subtle way, in a dignified way. And by all means, if people have a way to know somebody that they see, they feel that should be in a higher standard, find a way to speak to them. I would suggest, just a suggestion, it probably would be wise that you shouldn't begin with tznius and should really begin with seeing that the person sees that you care about them in general and their welfare. So I absolutely agree with you. When you have all these pains and hurts, it's very difficult to talk about certain matters, even if those matters are true, and even if they are as gula for parnasa to make more money to be able to pay that tuition in this questioner's question. Tznius, as the questioner writes, is definitely a thing in context. It's an important thing, but it has to be done in balance. And most important, the how you express it is just as important as the what, if not more important. Now, as I said, I've talked about this some more in episodes 4, 97, 98, 110, but suffice it for now. Especially the Rebbe did make emphasis as we go into the summer months about tznius because people become more lax. Tznius is a spiritual state of mind of dignity before God, which translates into a physical state of mind. Like the Rebbe told that former beauty queen, Israeli beauty queen, that when it says sheker achem v'hevel yefi kim yiras Hashem hitisallel, that sheker, false is grace, and hevel and empty is beauty. The main thing is yiras Hashem. The Rebbe said once you have yiras Hashem, the kavanah is it should infuse the chen and the yefi. But we see by the Imois, by our matriarch, that they were yefas teya, yefas mara as a quality. Inner beauty expressing itself in outer beauty. Inner modesty and inner dignity, spiritual dignity expressing itself in material and physical dignity. Next question, happiness. Which again a topic we chose because this is the weeks where on one hand not such happy days, but we still have the mitzvah of Ivdus Hashem b'simcha to serve God with happiness. So let us address this question. Are there and again I want to cross-reference, happiness was definitely a topic discussed in episodes 5, 58, 109, and 151. Are there methods, the questioner asks, to achieve happiness under all circumstances? When someone is unhappy and cannot identify the reason for their despondence, how can they find happiness? It seems very difficult to break out of a situation we seemingly don't understand or have control over. What tools does Chassidus offer us to help someone overcome their propensity to see things in a dispirited light? How can one have strong and good relationships with friends and family when he or she is stuck in a gloomy rut for no apparent reason? Okay. So in addition to what I spoke about in the previous episodes that I just referred to, I will add and say that in specific response to these questions is like this. Even secular scholars today acknowledge, they say things that are really based on pure Torah and that is happiness is not a commodity you can go purchase, or a commodity that you do press button this and you have happiness. Happiness is a teitzah. You can call it a symptom, a good symptom. It's a good result of activities that are healthy. So anyone that sets out and they say, you know what, I want to find happiness in my life. I want to find happiness. I'm going to search here. I'm going to go here. I'm going to read this book. I'm going to do that. You may get tips here and there, but the bottom line is happiness is a result of doing things that are healthy. And what's the first healthy thing to do is not focus on yourself. Happiness is a result of serving others, of loving others, of being kind to others. When a person focuses not on themselves and their needs, including their need for happiness, and they do things that help others, that results in happiness. It's a simple formula. And I challenge anyone to test it and tell me if it doesn't work. But it can't be testing it like, you know what, I'm going to go do a favor to someone and I'm going to run back home and see if I got happy. We're not talking about like that. It's an attitude of focus less on yourself, focus more on the cause, on the purpose of your being. Why are you here? How are you helping others? How are you serving others? How are you loving and being kind and compassionate to others? So fitting to our 3 weeks, because that's exactly the call of our times. Imagine what kind of world it would be like if people served each other in that way. This doesn't mean we don't have our needs. It doesn't mean meina nili mili, obviously. You have to take care of basic needs, but it means the focus and definitely the obsession is not with you and your happiness. It's fulfilling why you were sent to this world, fulfilling your mission, serving and helping others, and that always results in being a happier person. It's the rule of the game. And again, I challenge you, anyone in that direction. So you say, why is it so difficult then? Because it's very difficult to stop focusing on yourself, to be very honest. To stop gribbeln in sich, as the Rebbe writes in one letter to someone. Wenige gegribbelt in sich. How do you translate gegribbelt? The more you dig, the less you dig inside yourself. Gribbeln is more than digging. It's more like consumed, exploring yourself, always about me. The more you are a happier person. So that the difficulty is doing that, because we can be very selfish and very self-contained and self-interest driven. But that's where happiness comes from, that ability to be able to transcend ourselves. So are there methods? Yes, the method is to do exactly what I just suggested. Not the method to press a button and take a pill, this is a happiness pill, but rather the method is to focus on others and focus on your calling more than anything else. So the question, when someone is unhappy and cannot identify the reason, that's fine. Don't identify the reason. This isn't an infection, lack of happiness. It's not like I need to find the root of my unhappiness and then correct it. Do things. Do things that bring to joy, and you'll have the joy. To start analyzing all the factors. Now, I'm not talking about exceptions where a person has a particular trauma or loss that is overwhelming them. So there too, I would suggest being consumed with the cause of your loss is not necessarily going to help you, but that may require a little more professional work of getting through something, the catharsis, the healing, and that comes through a process of any type of post-traumatic experiences. But even there, you'll find that the happiness does not come because you analyze the cause and cause again and again. That only leads to being more unhappy and more guilt and more blaming yourself for whatever happened, correctly or incorrectly. The way ultimately is to help a person come and put their mind in other matters. And when you become focused and other priorities, whether you have to take care of your children, or you have to take care of other people, or you have to deal with responsibilities you have, that automatically fills your mind with positive energy, which leads toward happiness, as opposed with the negative energy of just remembering, reflecting, and obsessing over a negative experience. Which is, in all cases, people just sit and dwell upon something that happened to them again and again and again, and we all know what results come from that. So, what is the best way to overcome the propensity to see things in the dispirited light? Or if you're stuck, is surround yourself with positive people. Focus on some type of volunteer or work that helps others, whether it's special children, whether it's needy situations, whether visiting the sick, or whether it's in general mivtzoyim, going out and helping people discover, helping people, encourage people, inspiring them to do different mitzvahs, mitzvah tefillin, or mitzvah mezuzah, mitzvah tzedakah, or the other mitzvahs of the 10 mitzvahs that the Rebbe instituted. These are all factors that these are all tools. When you do them, automatically it brings simchadik energy into your life. Next question. Is free choice an evolutionary disadvantage? Okay. Free will is a basic principle in Judaism. The Rambam says it's Yesod Chazak, a strong foundation, the most powerful foundation, because without free will there's no choices, there's no accountability, and there's no Torah mitzvahs, there's no schar and einish, reward and punishment. So free will is a basic principle in Judaism. Yet it is no simple phenomenon. Doesn't free will complicate matters and throw in a measure of unpredictability into an otherwise deterministic universe? Without free will, wouldn't the world be able to fulfill its purpose in a certain defined and attainable fashion, risk-free? Don't the creatures of the plant and animal kingdom, you could also add the mineral kingdom, have it far simpler without free will? Man, on the other hand, who has the choice to choose wrongly, can do irreversible damage. So why is man at the top of the pecking order? Okay, very good question. But think about it the other way around. If we had no free will, what would be the purpose of life? Being puppets? There's absolutely no purpose for us to just play out a script. Yes, it would be simpler, but it would not have any purpose. It would not have any function. What would be our significance? What are we doing? Just playing out the script that God wrote for us? So that's number one point to make. Number two, if you remember before we discussed Matos-Maasei, that's exactly what free will does. It adds a dimension of unpredictability. Exactly right. Matos is a solid, this is the clockwork of nature. The sun will rise, the moon will rise. We know exactly the seasons change. We know how it is in the animal, plant, mineral. In all kingdoms, in all realms of this universe, every fiber of existence has a preset program. Only one X factor. Only one free radical, as they say. And that's the human being and free will. We can come in and do things that are actually destructive to us and to others, God forbid, but we could also elevate the world to places it could never reach on its own. So that's exactly what God wanted. He wanted that human being to come and make that choice. So does it throw in an unpredictability? Are there risks? Obviously. But there are also unbelievable gains that you could never gain without free will. One way to put it is that if God allowed such horrible things to happen, human beings doing things to each other, inhumane things, you have to imagine He's ready to forego that and not to compromise free will. Free will tells you how important free will is in the scheme of things, because without it there is no purpose for existence. We'll be talking a little bit more later about Nesava Kadosh Baruch Hu, God's desire for creating existence in this fashion, but that is a critical component. There's also a very fascinating letter which I should refer to, which I can't read the entire letter, it's a long letter, that the Rebbe wrote in Tovshin Daled. As a matter of fact, being that next month will be Chafov, the Rebbe writes, this is the first opportunity I have of replying to your letter of August 1st, 1944. In closing, a memorandum expressing some thoughts. I'm sorry to say that owing to the fact that I recently lost my father, the Rebbe is writing, Chafov, that year, the delay in answering you and offering you my comments was unavoidable. And the Rebbe goes into a whole discussion on this person's dissertation, thesis, about evolution. And about how a seed evolves into a plant, and a plant evolves into a tree, etc., etc. And the Rebbe makes some very strong comments about how he looks at free will, this individual, this thesis, and disagrees with the whole approach to free will, which is part of what I just spoke about. But I will read one thing the Rebbe speaks about, how Chabad Chassidus talks about the ideas, and says that, I just want to quote the quote about free will. The Creator is absolutely free. The Creator is the only thing in existence that's absolutely free, for He created both the universe and its laws. Only man of all creations has something similar to that freedom and choice, which is one of the proofs that man stands over and above all other creatures in the general pattern of development. If man, by his actions of free will and choice, does the opposite of the desired purpose of creation, which is the growing revelation of the divine spark within him, or within things surrounding him, and rather adds to the obscurity and concealment of the divine, he does not merely fail to advance on the scale of development, but actually recedes from it and brings down with him also the other things involved, and generally brings destruction in the world, God forbid. But if through free choice and will he chooses to do a good deed, bringing forth increased divine revelation, he thus does not merely advance in the course of his own development, which is possible by all creatures fulfilling their purpose, but by such act he brings something constructive and new into the creation of his own. That is, he performs an act of creation. Thus it is possible to say that the Creator gave man power of creation. As our sages say, Israel Jacob creates worlds. So it's a letter. If anybody wants to get the full letter, it's an English letter. Please email us or the forum, but leave us your email address because the forum itself is anonymous. Leave your email address, and we'll send you this long letter from the Rebbe, which talks about evolution, but interestingly, how he interweaves it from a Torah point of view. And I just quoted a piece of it regarding free will. Okay. Next question: what is the significance of a gematria? Please, my Yiddish name is Liba, which is spelled Lamed Ayin Bet Hey. I believe that adds up to 107. Well, yeah, Lamed and Ayin is 100, and 5 and 2 is 7. I will just say some people spell Liba with an aleph, but fine, you spell it with a Hey. I was named after my father's mother. I've recently taken the name on as my middle name. My father's family were Russian. The name was Brodsky. There is a connection to the Brodsky synagogue in the town of the same name. They were well known in the sugar industry in that town. Okay. Much more than that I don't know, except that I believe they must have been Lubavitch, even though my father wasn't. My question is this. Liba, I'm aware, means love in Yiddish. She was a very peaceful person and had a very peaceful marriage and life, even though they had 13 children, I am told. Does her gematria affirm this? Please reply when you can by email. Sincerely. Another questioner asks, can we find and create our own connections between words with gematrias? Is there significance to any numerical equivalence, or must there be a source for it? Okay. So firstly, I'd like to refer you to an entire class that I gave on this topic, which will be more extensive what I'm going to say now, even though I'll give you the summary. And that is a class called, I have a weekly global class, it's called, because it's broadcast all over the world, a live class every Wednesday night. So here's an opportunity to announce that. It's on themes usually. And I gave a class called Gematria for Beginners, the art and science behind Jewish numerology. So if you look for that title, Gematria for Beginners, the art and science behind Jewish numerology, you can find a long discussion on this topic. But to go a little specifics, there's a famous Shemer Amunim from Rabbi Yosef Irgas, section 121, parts 21, 23 to 23, and of course in Shari Yichud V'Amunah in Tanya chapters 1 and 7, where he talks about how Hebrew letters are actual channels for creation. They're channels of energy. The letters themselves, the shape of the letters, the meaning of the letters, and the numerology of the letters. So Hebrew alphabet is a very complex alphabet that has many layers in it. And he explains what's the numerology. The numerology of the alphabet, there are 22 letters in the Hebrew alphabet, basic letters. And they each correspond to a number. Aleph through Yud, the first 10 letters is 1 through 10, with Aleph being 1, Yud being 10. Chaf through Kuf is 10 by 10s to 100, 10 to 100, with Chav being Yud being 10. Yud being 10, Chav being 20. Lamed being 30, and Kuf being 100. And then the last 3 letters is 200, 300, and 400. Kuf, Resh, Shin, Tov, 100, 200, 300. So it goes by units, then it goes by tens, and then it goes by hundreds. And therefore, each letter has its correspondent number. And when you combine letters, like you just did with Liba, you can add up different numerologies. So he says, in Tanya, he says that gematria is the energies that are hidden in the word, but are a total of their numbers, of the number of energies existing in each word. Which means on one hand, it definitely has profound significance, but on the other hand, it's more of a hidden dimension, because it's not in the word itself, it's in the number of energies of that word. So generally speaking, gematria is a whole study in Pirkei Avos. It mentions gematrias, that you need to have particular wisdom. It's a whole study, an absolute way. You find different commentaries that focus on gematria, and very often you'll see people bring gematria in the Talmud commentaries explaining something. But here's the key thing. It's not just sitting down and, as they say, zustel avant savant, sticking a wall to a wall and just trying to make something out of it. The gematria is significant because the meaning is there. then the gematria is also there. To say, for example, take a word and say because its number is this and this is the same number as another thing, they mean they have a connection. Not necessarily. First there's a connection, then there's the number equivalent. So liba, yes, means love. So obviously it's going to connect to elements that have love, and therefore we'll have gematria called love. The same thing with other words. So it's important to remember that it has significance, but the significance is not just open for anyone, every Tom, Dick, and Harry to come down and start making connections. The connections have to have a basis, have to have a soul. It's like someone trying to figure out how to put together a pieces of a carpentry, and they don't really work, even though you force them together. If they first have to have a natural connection, then the details, including the numbers, will also fall into place. So gematria do need sources. Even though we can make a gematria, people do make gematrias even though there's no specific source. But they'll usually qualify and say, I'm thinking of this gematria, interesting to point out. I can't say for sure because there may not be source, may be no source. But especially when you have a connection that's already there, and then you find the gematria. Like someone will ask a question, I was dating somebody, and I'm looking whether their gematria, if their name fits my gematria. So my response was, that's not how you begin. First you begin by seeing if you have a compatibility. Do you relate to each other? Do you trust each other? Do you have an emotional compatibility, intellectual compatibility? Then, after everything fits, and you happen to want to check the gematria, but not as a deal breaker, obviously. It's there. It could be the chiduda, as they say, or lahamtik, to sweeten the icing on the cake, perhaps. But to make that the primary thing, obviously, is not the way of the Torah. Okay. And as I said, more on this topic I addressed in that class, and you can refer to that. Good. Now we're going to do a few follow-ups, and then we'll do the Chassidus question, and we'll do, as our custom is, the essays. So here's some follow-up. Waiting for marriage. Hi, Rabbi Jacobson. I want to discuss with you today shlichus as it pertains to anash. That's the anash is a word for anshe shlemenu, the community. But first, I want to comment on what you spoke about older bochrim working. So this is referring to episode last week and 2 weeks ago, 170 and 169, where I discussed the topic of older bochrim who are not yet married. I believe it was on episode 169. One of the things you said was that older bochrim, older students, should try to learn, older bochrim means older young bachelors, should try to learn until they married. And if they can't learn full-time, they should work in an area of chinuch, shlichus, and we weren't sent to this world to sell cell phones online or to sell furniture. I think that's the examples you gave. Sounds funny when I read it back. Okay. I respectfully disagree with you on the above observations. I agree with you that if a bocher is gifted academically, he should use his talent in the field of chinuch, education, teaching, shlichus, etc. Especially if he is thinking of going on shlichus after marriage. Unfortunately, we are not all gifted academically, or I should really say fortunately, because if we were all gifted academically, it would be quite a boring world with no art, music, etc. So my point is, we are not all cut out to be the same. Hashem gave us each our unique talents to do our shlichus. So for some of us, our shlichus may be to sell iPhones and or furniture. My reasoning for this is, number one, I believe that it's a mitzvah saseh daraisa, a Torah mitzvah, law, to provide for your family. Number two, as I mentioned above, not everybody has the academic talents to go on literal shlichus. As far as bochrim are concerned, I think it's very healthy to work at least part-time, especially for older bochrim. My logic is as follows. Number one, an older bocher's self-esteem is already down, so working and making some money gives you a quiet self-esteem boost. Number two, for a younger bocher, it's okay not to work because he's in a yeshiva. However, for an older bocher, when it comes to shidduchim, if he's not working, it's looked at kind of strange. He's an older bocher, why isn't he working? Back to the shlichus and how it pertains to our nash topic. In Lubavitch, the most respected people are the shluchim. These are the Rebbe's emissaries. And that's really a testament to the success of the Rebbe shlichus campaign. However, Anash in Crown Heights and around the world look at themselves like farmers and are looked at as farmers. This is only my observation. Obviously, I disagree with that outlook on oneself. As mentioned above, some of the reasons why not everybody goes on shlichus. Here is why I think this outlook is wrong. Firstly, I think the Rebbe considered every Lubavitcher Chassid to be a shliach. As far as Crown Heights goes, the Rebbe farbranged with us and gave kontresim, which was just for Nash and Tmim, and of course the shluchim as well if they were here. Rabbi Jacobson, are you aware of any places where the Rebbe speaks of Anash as shluchim? Please share. Secondly, if the definition of shlichus is afotzas hayadus, hamayonis va'atera, then you can go do shlichus anywhere, even if you sell iPhones and furniture. Please don't take what I'm writing personally. As Rabbi Shlomo Kunin suggested, every member of Anash should always take a pair of tefillin with them, so when they meet a Jew, they could help him put on tefillin. The same could be done in any other area of shlichus, for example, creating a new shir, initiating a new chavrusa, and with another member of Anash. Lubavitchers are also Jewish, after all. So Reb Simon, I want to conclude my essay, or comment, question, with the following point. I think we have to empower Anash and call them shluchim instead of telling them, guys, stop being farmers. Thanks for giving me the opportunity to express myself here. I hope you can talk about these topics on the next Farbrengen. No hard feelings. Hatzlacha Rabbi. P.S. Reb Simon, this is my third letter I'm writing to you. I was thrilled when you read 2 letters of mine on episode 168. I'm following your show for about 3 years now, but I could never muster the strength to write a letter because my English is not so great. But I guess 2 weeks ago I just wrote Lechatchila Riber. I would like to polish up my English. Would you have any idea how to go about it and what to do? What do you think about my writing? If I may ask you a personal question, how did you learn such a good English? So let's begin with the first questions. Well, I read the entire letter because I believe this is a good platform for people expressing themselves. A lot of good points you've made, and I don't disagree with them. You have to remember, MyLife, Chassidus Applied. I try my best to convey an answer. I don't see things in black and white. There are gray areas almost in every topic. And obviously when you talk about in a comprehensive way, there are all kinds of exceptions in different situations. But I will say, and I've said this a number of times, there's no question 7 billion people on this earth are shluchim of God. They wouldn't be here if God did not want them to be on this earth. 14 million Jews are particular shluchim of Hashem, to bring tzedek and yesher, Hashem mitzvahs b'nei neach, and of course among Jews what they have to do. So that's a given. That's a birthright. Nobody's a farmer. Nobody doesn't matter. Nobody's a peasant. Nobody's inferior. Period. There's no gray area at all. Black and white. However, in the choices we make, in fulfilling the shlichus, you can be completely consumed with your own interests and ignore what God wants of you, why you were sent to this earth. You can be doing 90% take care of yourself and 10% do something for serving and fulfilling your calling. It can be 80-20. It can be 75-25. It's not a numbers game. I just wanted to point out that the variations on the spectrum of the human race and all of us is very, very extreme. And I'm not going to go through every possibility. That we're talking here in general thrusts and general themes and general terms, that the goal is to not be focusing just on you. When I said cell phones or furniture was just an example, but to focus on changing this world. You were sent to this world not to sell anything, for that matter. You were sent to this world to bring godliness into this world, to make a dirah b'tachtenim, each in our own way. The best possible way is, of course, listening to our Rebbe, someone who sees the Rebbe as his Rebbe, and tells us 24/7 to be my shliach, which means the Eibishter shliach. Obviously, you have needs to be taken care of. You have a family. You need to eat and sleep. You need to drink. But you're a soldier all the time. A soldier, even when he's asleep, is a soldier. That would be the optimal. If for whatever a person cannot do that, obviously he remains a shliach to fulfill God's will and in his particular way. And obviously also, even among shluchim and among all of us, shluchim, I mean even the full 24/7 shliach, so to speak, but all of us who are 24/7 shluchim, we all are different. We have ein deis saying Shabbos, we have different ways of thinking, we have different personalities, we have different dispositions, we have different opportunities. So clearly each one has a different role to play, or else we wouldn't be here. So that goes without saying. But the question is, the focus is going to be on self or on the divine plan? And that's where there's decisions made. Can you be in Crown Heights and sell iPhones and furniture and also be talking to people about Yiddishkeit? You can. But the fact of the matter is your mind is going to be preoccupied a lot with your business. Is that a usher? I didn't say it's forbidden. The Torah speaks, Masa Matan Bamuna, do your business faithfully and ethically, as long as you do it according to Shulchan Aruch. Are you living up to your greatest potential and fulfilling your calling in this world? I would say no. And I don't think anyone would disagree. Because no one's going to say, my soul came down to earth to sell cell phones. They'll say, I'm selling cell phones to make parnasa. So it's a means to an end. And that parnasa I'm using to give tzedakah, and I'm using to build a godly family, a divine family, and I'm using my time and energy to help other people. So the real question is, how much are you going to be involved in the means and how much in the end? So most of what you've read, I agree, but I wanted to put it into that context. As far as the end of the discussion about writing, well, I went to the yeshivas that most of you went that are talking about this. I think some of us are probably blessed with certain talents in writing and communicating, and some are less. But actually, to me, writing is all about reading. You read, you learn words. You communicate, you learn words. And then you communicate words. I didn't take any particular writing classes. However, I've read, and I continue to try to perfect, and that's never good enough. You always look at your stuff, and you always want it to be better. But I think writing, to me, is communication. If you communicate well, which means you communicate with sincerity. It doesn't mean you're perfect. It doesn't mean that you can perfectly state everything, but sincerity, care. And you try to address things in a real way, not some type of bluff and some type of putting on and putting on a show. Generally speaking, communication, then you find the right words. Words, again, are like symptoms. Words are containers. If the heart is there, you'll find the right words. And if you need someone to do a little editing, you do a little editing. But that's an aside, a little side discussion. There's some more follow-up, but because of time limits, I'm going to move that to the next week's classes. And then go straight to the Chassidus question. The Chassidus question is, please explain the Alter Rebbe statement regarding Hashem's desire for a dirah b'tachtenim. The expression is that the Alter Rebbe brings in Tanya Perek Lamed Vav from Medrash Tanchuma and other places. Nesava Kadosh Baruch Hu liyas le Baruch Hu dirah b'tachtenim. The Rebbe Rasha would add Baruch. God desired, Nesava comes from the word taaveh, desired to have a dirah, a home, b'tachtenim, as he explains there in Tanya, chapter 36. Tachtenim means not physical lowest, but spiritually the most devoid of divine revelation. That in a world where the divine is concealed, to make a home for God precisely in that world. That is the Hashem's Nisav. Then we have in Samach Vav in the beginning, and the Tzemach Tzedek brings it a word from the Alter Rebbe that says, if a taaveh is nitoken kasha, on a desire there's no question, so you can't ask why did he desire. So this questioner is asking, as the Chassidus question of the week, how can we apply the idea of a taaveh, lust, desire to God in the first place? Isn't taaveh derogatory? Say someone has a taaveh, desire, a lust. And what is the Alter Rebbe adding by saying that a taaveh is not subject to questions? Isn't it obvious that Hashem precedes and transcends logic? So that's the second half of the question, a different part of the question, different question. What does it mean? We know that Hashem precedes and transcends logic because He created logic. So what are you saying? A taaveh nishtaken kasha? There's no kasha in saying Atzmus has no kasha because no kasha exists yet. So what is the meaning of the Alter Rebbe's Torah? So there are things that we learned inside Chassidus, some things we received, we understand. I will have to give some of my understanding of it as I picked it up in my years of education and learning and continue to grow in this matter. So the first thing the Alter Rebbe is establishing is that this Nesava Kadosh Baruch Hu, he questions where did this originate. Now remember, the Medrash is talking about the Beis HaMikdash, the Mishkan. Also the Mikdash b'shechanti b'seicham, so the Medrash says that God desired there should be a dirah b'tachtenim in the lowest of worlds, and the Mishkan embodied that, personified that. Gold, silver, copper, physical things. But the Kavana is that should be the entire world should be a home for God. When Mashiach comes, as the Alter Rebbe explains in chapter 36, and then in 37, then we'll have that home. Today it's not a home. Would God feel comfortable to be in this world right now? Most of the people, it's a hostile world to the divine. There are atheists, there are agnostics, there are people living selfishly, not consistent with the way Hashem wants us to live. Adira means aligned that this is a comfortable place. You feel comfortable. There are homes you go to, you feel that I'm at home. And there are places you don't feel at home. So this elaborates on the meaning of dirah, Matos-Maasei, what it means, etc. But the Alter Rebbe is coming to focus on the word nesava. Because you can ask the question, where did this desire originate from? In the language of Chassidus, is it Atzilus? Is it in Bria? Is it higher than Atzilus? It says Nasav is Matos-Maasei is Baruch. The desire is in Atzmus itself, meaning it's the beginning of everything starts with this Nasav. So then when someone asks a question, why did God desire this? What's the reason? So you can give a lot of reasons. There are reasons for creation. There's a whole sikh in Chelik Vav L'Kutei Sikha Shmois Beis, brought from the different Maimorim and Chassidus, from Samach Vav and Tavshin Beis and other Ayin Beis and so on, that talk about different reasons given for the creation. One of them is Lahativ Lehetiv Lebruv, to do good to the creations. Other is Lahakik Dulase, that his greatness should be recognized. Legala Shlemus Kechesef, to reveal his great potential. All these reasons Chassidus says can't be the ultimate reason, because all of the reasons have their limitations, and at the end of the day, it's all reason, logic, and logic doesn't exist in the Atzmos. So the Alter Rebbe says, the ultimate reason comes from a place called desire that has no question. There's no question about that. In other words, it precedes questions. The whole idea of logic and question and answer was not even created yet. It's not like he doesn't need an answer. There's no issue of question and answer. So the question then is, what exactly does this then signify, this taaveh? So obviously, the dibra teira b'lashon b'nei adam, we're talking about our language. God does not have a taaveh, doesn't have desires, doesn't have lusts. But he created us with a taaveh. In order to we should be able to get a little glimpse and taste of what a taaveh is by the Eibishter. So we have taavehs. Absolutely, we have taavehs that are not appropriate, but we also have taavehs of Kedusha. Our desire, I want something. I lust for something. And someone say, why? You say, there's no reason. It's higher than reason. It's not irrational. It's super irrational. It's higher than reason. It reflects who I am. I want to hug my child right now. Someone say, why? Give me an explanation. You're a rational person. That's what I desire right now. The child is part of me. I would just want to hug him. Can you explain it biologically? Is it part of me? Maybe. Maybe you can. But it's not rooted in the logic. It's a super rational connection. So that means the desire, the connection for having a world, a dirah b'tachtenim, is not rooted in one of the logical dimensions. It's rooted in the essence itself. And we use nesav simply to give us a taste. It's the only word that the shachich ha'sa'ezna says. In order we have to use a word. So in order to use a word, what's the best word to use and qualify saying it's an inadequate word? The best inadequate word we can use is the word nesav, because it's most closest to something that is super irrational. So number one, it's absolutely nothing negative and derogatory. On the contrary, it shows on higher than rational. And as far as what the Alter Rebbe is coming to demonstrate is that it's rooted in a place that's beyond logic. It's not about a logical connection. It's not about, you do this, so you're going to reveal the divine, and that way you'll fulfill something that the divine wants. No, Nesav does not talk about us. It's his desire based on his terms, not due to logic. And therefore it's not like he's lacking it, and you're filling a lack, as the Sikh in the Chelik Vav L'Kutei Sikha explains. But that's what he wants. It's a reflection of what he wants. Even want, desire is already, as I said, a limited term, but it's the only terms we can use. One more point I'd like to add. It's a very fascinating Sikha. Vayeshev Tavshin Lamed Zayin. Almost unknown. Most people are not even aware of it. Very deep Sikha about this topic, and how the Rebbe explains how taaveh is the highest level in Shtalshlus, or even higher than Shtalshlus. Even though there's the discussion whether Ratzon or Tainug is higher, but ultimately Tainug. And the Sava Kodesh Baruch Hu is the term taaveh is connected to Tainug. It's not just he wants. There's a profound pleasure connected to it. But again, pleasure there doesn't mean pleasure as we understand it. It means some type of super rational desire that reflects the essence as close as possible. Logic is not the essence of who you are. The logic is how your soul manifests in a particular faculty. Just like you'd say your ability to write or your ability to throw a stone does not reflect who you are. Your mind also doesn't reflect who you are. A mind reflects more because it captures somewhat of the spirit of what makes a human being unique, the ability to think, to imagine, to dream. But does it express who? It's just most of your eyes express who you really are. They are pieces of it. Taaveh expresses as close as possible the core of who you are, and the same thing is reflected in the Mayla. So you can look at Vayeshev Tavshin Lamed Zayin. The Rebbe talks about this a bit more. It's a lot of very interesting new points that you're not going to find anywhere else in the Mayla of the Sava or Tainuk. With that, let us go now to the three essays. First essay is 4 Languages of Growth by Yaakov Wagner, 40 years old, Rabbinical College of America, teacher, Morristown. Beautiful essay. Rabbi Wagner, and he does it the way he's a teacher there, a very well-known and beloved teacher. Speaks about life as a constant cycle of evolution and progress. Human beings yearn for purpose and meaning. We aren't satisfied remaining static when at the end of any period there is no discernible development to look back upon. So we need to constantly feel like we're growing. Often, however, when considering the objective, it feels like staring up an imposing mountain and wondering, how will I ever scale this height? So he says, in this essay we will examine a method illuminated by Chassidic thought that demonstrates the gradual stages of growth to help us implement effective and lasting progress. And he goes through the study and analysis of the 4 cups that we drink Pesach night by the Seder, and the 4 different meanings of the words and their themes, and how there's 4 actual steps based on Zohar and Kabbalah. It's a very beautiful essay, I must say, starting, of course, with the V'hitzesi, V'hitzalti, V'ga'alti, and V'lakachti. And explains both, of course, the meanings, but also demonstrates how they are 4 steps of growth, and they can be applied, a formula that can be applied to any change in growth a person wishes to make. He discusses it in psychological terms, a very beautiful chart that explains it with a tree analogy: germination of a seed, setting roots, emerging of the plant, production of fruit and seed pollination, and explains it in Avodah and the spiritual meaning and practical application. Very well done in that sense, and good footnotes. So that's essay number 1. This essay, like all new essays, can be received if you subscribe to our weekly email. And we also post them at meaningfullife.com/MyLife. Just look for Essays 2017 for this and the other essays. Good. The next essay is called Beneath the Surface, True Feminism, by Chaya Engel, 25 years old, teacher, Brooklyn, New York. And addresses head on, takes the bulls by the horn. Women, what's the issue? In search of me. I'm a woman. What is my role in Judaism? How do I express myself? What is my worth? Does Judaism really appreciate me? Questions that plague so many minds today. And goes into understanding what is a woman and dispelling many of the myths and stereotypes, addressing issues like why women don't have leading roles in shul, such as rabbi or chazan, cantor, and many other things regarding the mitzvahs. Really goes through the whole gamut of all the questions asked, and using Chassidus, primarily explore the Sichos talks of the Rebbe, as well as Tanya, to address women in society versus women in Judaism, defining what Chassidus defines men and women, the masculine and feminine energies, and then addressing in the real contemporary issues, some of them which I mentioned before, and others as well. So this is a really, I believe, a great contribution to this part of our literature, which is so controversial and so many people have questions about. A must read. And of course concluding with the different mitzvahs and special mitzvahs that women have, and goes back to conclude the whole question of how to look at women with a practical application of women's role. I will not give away many of the key points because I think it's worthwhile reading on your own and to do justice to its full message. That's essay number 2. And essay number 3, my friends, is called Restoring Normalcy Through Prayer. It's a Hebrew essay. Dirah Y Mechapesh Chibur, meaning the Y generation is looking for connection. A Hebrew essay written by Batsheva Siegel, 36 years old, Chabad Berlin, Shlucha in Berlin, Germany. What can I say? All over the world. Amazing, amazing. So this essay talks, of course, about our modern phenomena of disconnection with our social media and all our technologies. And actually, very disarmingly and surprisingly brings in prayer, tefillah, as a solution. Not trying to refrain or abstain from modern technology, which he considers to be an impossible thing to do, but to use tefillah, prayer, to connect to ourselves, to Hashem, and to each other. Really beautiful, stated with Yerushalmi and with different midrashim, talking about what the meaning of prayer is. I found this very, very stimulating essay and very relevant, and really will give you a new appreciation of prayer that you have not heard before, and discussing it in very practical and realistic terms. At the end, she concludes with a bullet, step-by-step process how to begin. It may seem formidable, but how you can do it in a step-by-step process. Very well done. And with that, we conclude this essay. With this, we also conclude this week's episode of MyLife Chassidus Applied. Every Sunday evening, 8 to 9 p.m. It's a great honor to be able to continue doing this. I don't have the right words. I'm immeasurably moved by the questions that come in, the personal nature of them, the candidness, the honesty. And I really believe that together, when we put our heads together and we ask the right questions, we ask all the questions, and we look for the answers, even if we don't always find the right answer exactly, what better way in your futza meinasecha chutza, to take the chutza within each of us, the chutza within our communities, the chutza within the world, and bring meinasecha in a yafutzu, in a distribution, but not just distribution, as the Rebbe says, yafutzu, to spread in a form of a faratzta, spreading over overflowing with the mayonis in this chutza, especially in these 3 weeks. We do that. We are tackling the root of the issues that we're challenged with, and applying Chassidus to our lives. Yefutz meinasecha chutza, as Mashiach told the Baal Shem Tov, that will be osimad malka Mashiach, doing it in a unique way in these 3 weeks, especially in increasing in Avos Yisrael, which is a connection between all of us, even if we may have different personalities, different opinions, but the connection, the love, that we never personalize, we never become petty, we don't allow it to become divisive. We may have different views on things, but so what? Maybe that enriches it like a mosaic. And we should be zeichet to Yehavkiyam Meil L'Sasan L'Simcha L'Moedim Tevim. So until next Sunday, 8 to 9 p.m., this has been MyLife Chassidus Applied. Everyone have a blessed week and a freilich and tamid. And we should be zeichet to the Gula, no, before the 3 weeks conclude and before the 9 days, take it from Miyad Mamash.